Hey guys, so something a bit different. I thought that I would make a video about how I create, export, and then navigate using the tracks that I have. I create most of my own tracks for longer rides in Google Earth. So you'll need Google Earth or Google Earth Pro, and you will need some kind of conversion software. I use a GPS Babel, and you will need something that can put the files from Google Earth that you've converted into a GPX format, which I do in GPS Babel, into the GPS itself. I use a software called Map Source. So those are the three main things I'll be covering on the software end. Now there are alternatives to both GPS Babel, something to convert the file, and Map Source, something to get it into your GPS. But those are what I use. However, Google Earth Pro is a must. Okay, so I'm gonna start showing my screen and exactly how I move through this process. So you can see here I have open what I believe is the latest version of Google Earth Pro, although if you're running an older version, it doesn't really matter. I happen to right now be looking at a section of the Mojave Desert near Spangler Hills. The first thing that you might notice is I have a lot of tracks. I keep them organized by region and then break it down by ride. I try and keep it alphabetical. It's not always perfect. If you want things to be alphabetical, you have to move them yourself. You can click and drag folders just like you would in most other programs. So I could move that there if I wanted to. So the basics of getting started, you see a place, you want to check it out on Google Earth, you want to create a KML line string, which is what you're seeing on my screen here. I will explain how I deal with areas that are covered in woods or trees or some kind of barrier, but I'm using the desert here as an obvious example because it's the most easy to spot where the trails are. So if you do have files open, the quick way that you reference what they are in case you can't find them is you can right click on any file just like that. You can rename it, copy it. I do that all the time. And you can go to properties. That will light up its location over here in your folders. So now I know that that's where the actual file is. To view and unview files, you just select the checkbox. So now it's hidden from view. If I click it again, it comes back. I'm gonna hide it as if I'm creating this from scratch. You'll notice that the reason why Google Earth Pro is so useful compared to trying to look at trails on Google Maps is because it shows you, it lays the image over the actual elevation profile. You'll notice if I hover my cursor somewhere down at the bottom, right here, it actually tells me the elevation of where my cursor is. So you can see it goes up and goes down as I move down the hill. A better way to get a look at how extreme this is by zooming in. So you can kind of see how it really does show the elevation profile, and you can start messing around with that. If you want to tilt the view down, let's say you zoomed in and you don't like that you're looking up so much, you can use this eyeball arrow, which adjusts like the elevation of where you're looking. If you click on the north letter up here, the N, it will reorient you so that north is at the top of your screen, south is at the bottom, and so forth. If you do want to spin around, sometimes it's easier to build tracks by following the route out in kind of the direction that it's going. You can spin that around. You want to make sure you get very friendly with this button, Add Path. Okay, so if you want to edit a line string, I've already named it. You're going to open it up and you're going to go to Properties. You can look at things like measurements, which will get longer as I create the track, and style and color. You can adjust the color here. You can adjust the width. I can make it like thicker. It would literally appear, this would get as a thicker line. But measurements, often I like to keep this open as I'm creating the track. So the first dot I believe I started with was here. It will keep adding dots in the direction that you started moving out. So if I want to add on the end dot, I have to select that end dot. It will highlight green. And then I can start adding stuff off of it. If you want to remove dots, you can either right click or you can select the dot and start pressing delete, and it should move backwards. So you can see we're back down to that first dot. I can highlight it green, and let's say I want to start here. I can stay pretty zoomed out. The track that you're creating does not have to be perfect, but do note that especially when you come across intersections, to make those points the most clear. So that way it's easy to reference when you're out riding and know that you're exactly on the line and not make it ambiguous as to whether you're supposed to turn or not. If it gets difficult to see the line, you can obviously zoom in more. Again, it's really nice because you can kind of see how Google Earth is laying that image over the topography. So let's say that was my line string. I can go up here. Do not just hit the X, that will kill your progress. You want to make sure you hit OK. Once you hit OK, it will automatically save into whatever folder you had open last. You can see I had one of my Mojave folders open last, so it saves it in the bottom. But again, if you wanted to move it around, you could move it into other folders. You could move it within the order that it is here. It's pretty simple. The only other thing I add is points. So let's say I want to add a place mark. So let's say there's a place where I think I might get confused, or a marker where I want to be able to zoom out on my ride and spot it easily. That might be here. So let's go click to add place mark, and let's name it road crossing. Road crossing, I'm going to put that here. So let me remove that pin by right-clicking and saying delete. Again, you can also rename, and you can view the properties such as the latitude and longitude. You can adjust the style and the color, etc. Very similar to those line strings. So another feature I want to talk about is this idea of being able to look forwards and backwards in time. And I know the perfect place to do it, which is right here. So I'm using this as an example because there's single track that follows through here, but if you look at the satellite image, there's just a line. There's no single track there. There's no hint that single track exists. There's no evidence of that single track. I can hit that north to reorient, and you can see I have a pin here that I've created called car. Now, if you click down here, this little clock with the backwards arrow, and it says 1985. I don't know why it's 1985. I guess that's when they started satellite imagery or something like that. So if you click this down here, it will give you this timeline. You can slide this marker, the two will follow each other, back and forth to see satellite imagery. The reason why this is so helpful is because the latest images that have been taken and are publicly available with Google Earth are usually not the ones currently being shown when you open up Google. They're not the ones being laid perfectly. Often they're like from 2016 or 2017. So notice what happens if I scroll this all the way here. So that's the most recent image. You can clearly see now how my line is following these trails here. And also notice how the car is now painted black and white checkered. So even the car changed appearance. Most of these trails, I think, were cut as a result of the Spangler Hills open riding area expansion, and they were used in, I know, some of the District 37 races. So thank you to those guys, but this is just a really good example, like again, if I zoom in here, of how adjusting that timeline really shows the difference just a couple years can make. This is a really long route that I have, this blue line. I often make complete routes as one total track. Sometimes I split it up into two parts using the copy tool and then deleting half, copy tool deleting the first half or deleting the last half. The reason I do that is because some GPSs, the older models, limit you to 500 points. Unfortunately, one of the properties that Google doesn't show you is how many dots or points are within a file. So if I click on Show Elevation Profile, I'm not going to zoom all the way out because you don't get to see my whole track. The key numbers to look at here are the elevation gain / loss. That can be fun if it's like a big mountain climb or something. And the max slope. So you can see the max slope uphill it's recording is 23.7, and the max downhill is -26.7. there's nothing that's a red flag in here then. However, if you suddenly see that your max slope is listed at like 47% or something like that, or something crazy, 80, it can be a glitch, but it can also be the truth. So start scrolling along your line. You can see that the slopes are appearing. Oh, there I am. See how the arrow shows up? You can see that the slope numbers appear and the arrow also tracks along your route. Try and find where that number is appearing and look if it's like a consistent big hill climb or if it's like a glitch where Google Earth has registered some kind of shelf there and so is telling you that you have a super steep slope. But I do like to check that because it's one really good way if you have not ridden in an area to determine whether the ride should be done one way versus the other way. If you are curious about the imagery date, it's down here. This one apparently was taken in 2013, hence it being so out of date. If I scroll to most recent, you can see that it updates to 2023. The coloring is super weird, but you just have to get over it, I guess, when you're using the most recent images, and all you care about is finding those trails. Again, you can zoom out here. And then one layer I do like to have on, although it's not really useful in places like this, is just photos. If anyone's taken photos, they will show up. I can show you an example of what that looks like. Over here in Spangler Hills, this is the actual staging area. You can see lots of people have taken photos. Also, if you think, let's say someone was on top of a hill and you think, am I crazy or did I figure out where that hill was? And you basically barely hover your guy above, or you can go into Street View. It takes you into Street View automatically if you zoom in enough. I guess they call it ground level view. You can exit ground level view up here. And then if you don't want to go into ground level view, you use these eyeball arrow keys that I mentioned. And then you can basically hover just above ground level and drag around. So that's a really cool feature, especially if you can see your track overlaid on the ground. Just wanted to point that out. Okay, so let's say we're talking about Hollister Hills, and we're talking about the Wrens. This is for when you have wooded areas that won't always show up on the Google Earth view because they're hidden by trees. There, that was the roads layer. So some places it will show up for you. That's pretty rare. Let's pretend like I was trying to map lights out and clearly it's covered in some areas. Just a couple things to keep in mind. Again, don't move that box too far out of the way. The style and the color are what I want. Is that for a lot of wooded areas, you can kind of see the trail for a lot of it. It's actually not as bad as you might think. You can also make educated guesses about where the trail is going. For example, I can spot it through the trees here, and I can still spot it. Now, I can't see it through here, but I'm fairly confident that it mostly just follows the hillside, and you can see the contours of the land. So it's probably not in a perfectly straight line. It probably curves around with how the land is shaped. I don't really like this angle, so I'm going to kind of move it over here because it will make it easier to spot the trail when it does appear. And I've never actually mapped lights out before. I have had no reason to. You can see it appearing here. You can see a glimpse of it there. You get really good at just spotting the trail. And especially if there's no junctions, it doesn't ultimately matter because when you're out riding, you will be barely off the line or you will keep reconnecting with the line. Let's see, there's the end of it right there. So knowing that, so let's say I also like to work backwards. So let's say all I know is the trail is here and I can see it here, right? So now to fill in this blank, I can go back and reselect that first point and then start adding dots around the side like that. So that would be lights out. I can look down at my measurements and see it comes in at 1 mile. I can adjust whatever I need. And then again, I'm not going to click that X. I'm going to say, okay. If you want to mess around with this, I highly suggest creating a route at your local riding area and then following it and seeing if you can navigate with it before you just head out into the wilderness trying to use this technique. And then the other thing I want to demo is what do you do if it's truly forested? Like you can maybe see some trail entrances and exits, but not much else. In that case, you probably need overlays. Okay, so a quick side quest from Google Earth will take us to the MVUM Finder by the US Forest Service. If you are in California, this is the Bible for finding US National Forest trails. If you are not in California, I hope there is an alternative out there for you. I know Nevada has some really good maps, etc. Basically, anywhere you find maps, SVRA, PDF map, whatever it is. But this is where I go to for a lot of stuff since so much land is covered and it's highly accurate. Some other map formats might not be as accurate, but these are. So I want the Georgetown map that I'm going to use for this example. I'm going to get that to light up, and then you're going to go view PDF. I already have it open here. Something to note with using map PDFs is that you want to be zoomed in, at least with these, and you don't want to use the entire map, because if you get it lined up in the center, let's say here, it's going to get more and more inaccurate with lining up with the actual trails on Google Earth as you move out. And so the way this works is you want to zoom in pretty far, and this already represents a pretty small region. So let's say I'm going to break this up into maybe 5 screen grabs, maybe 1 here, 1 over here, 2 down here, and then this last bottom one. Do kind of pay attention to where the borders of those screen grabs are. It's best if you can really just get barely an overlap so you can line up those images correctly. Okay, so let's say I want to take a screen grab of this upper corner, do something like that, and I'll save it to my computer and call it, you know, Georgetown upper right, whatever you want to call it. Just make sure you save it to your computer in a place that's organized. I have a folder called Map Screen Grabs, and we'll go back into Google Earth. Okay, so I'm here in Google Earth. I'm back over Georgetown. Again, quick reminders. This is to navigate north around. I can re-click it to navigate perfectly north. The eye arrows move you up and down. Let's reset. These arrows move you around, but you can just click and drag. And I have photos turned on in case anyone's taken any pictures. It looks like there's one here of the fire tower. So I'm going to right click on these tracks because I already have some tracks here, and I'm going to hide them. I right click them to identify where they are, and I'm going to hide these. So you can see certain fire roads poking through. I want to add in that map from the US Forest Service, which has all the official trails on it. So I'm going to go to Add Image Overlay. I'm going to rename it Georgetown 1. You could also do like Georgetown Upper Right or something like that. I'm going to hit Browse and go to Map Screen Grabs and Georgetown Demo 1. It's going to open at 100% opacity. You want to decrease that a little bit to start with, and then you can decrease it more later. You can drag it around by clicking those center crosshairs, and you can start to see the magic happen. Okay, there's Bald Mountain. So if that's Bald Mountain, so very quickly you can see I've identified, for example, this road right here is this. So it looks like the map is currently too small. So let me zoom out a little bit. Make sure you hold down Shift when you drag those corners, otherwise it will warp the map scale, and we don't want to do that. That's about as good as it's going to get. And the way to check too, because again, I mentioned how it gets slightly more inaccurate as you move it around, is to pick an area in a different part of the map, for example down here, and see how it really does line up with a large chunk each time you move it around to focus on another area. Now I'm lined up here. Now I'm lined up perfectly up here. So again, this image is movable. So you can just leave it where it is. It's going to be pretty darn accurate, but you can also move it around each time you're mapping out a different trail to reorient with the fire road. So I'm going to decrease the opacity so that I can still see those dots, but I can also really see the map coming through, and I'm going to click OK. So now it's locked on. And what's really cool is that it is also locked on to the topography itself. So you can start to see how this becomes a really helpful tool in trying to determine where trails are and where trails aren't. For example, if I was mapping out 4-2, this is really helpful. Let's overlay my maps if I can find them. So these are some of the routes I have mapped out. You can see it doesn't always perfectly line up with the dots, but it's pretty dang close. So having these map overlays makes a huge difference in mapping in forested areas. Again, they can be hard to come by. There are maps that exist for other states. And again, I think this is all one track. I'm not sure how I did that. Props to me. But often something like this could be broken out. So when you're finally ready to export a ride, let's say it's like 5 tracks total and a couple waypoints or more that you've added, pins that you've added, you can put it all in one folder together. Yes, okay, here's a better example. It's a folder I called French Meadows GPS, and I put copies of or the original files of anything that I wanted to actually see on ride day into this folder. The way to export it out of Google is to right-click and go Save Place As. So I don't want it as a KMZ. I want it as a KML. It's easier to convert, and I think more programs accept converting KMLs over KMZs. KML is also the Google Earth line string file format, so you can see that it showed up like that with its little icon as if it was like a PDF, but it's Google Earth. So I'm going to save it as a KML, French Meadows _GPS.kml. It names it after the folder, but you can name it something else if you want, and I'm going to hit save. So that's how you get it out of Google Earth. Again, only put the stuff that you want to see all together into one folder. It's so much better than trying to export individual files or individual points. So all of this is being stored together. Do know when it gets imported into your GPS, they are all considered separate line strings or files or pins, whatever you want to call it, that you can hide and unhide and color code separately. So it's not like it's all one locked together mush of lines. So there really is no downside to putting everything in a folder together. Can't stress that enough. So next we're moving on to how to convert the files, in my case using GPS Babel. Okay, so this is GPS Babel. This is a free software. I used to have an older version of it that was free to download online. Just Google GPS Babel, there's a website. I already have these presets, so this is what it looks like when you open it up. These are the last 2 I used. This is the input file format. It's a Google Earth keyhole markup language. I don't know if you noticed that, but there's a pattern here, KML, saved it as a KML file. If you're in the older version of GPS Babel, it just says GPX, but we want GPX XML, not any of this GPS stuff. We want GPX XML file format. To select your file, you're going to go File Names, and you're going to find it. In my case, I have it in Documents. I have it in KML_GPX, and it's called that. Oh, in our case, we exported French_Meadows_GPS.kml. We're going to open that. Now it labels it up here. That's the file we're converting. Clicking on File Name under Export opens up a window. I'm not sure if it's showing or not. And we're going to name it, I'm going to keep the name the same. I like using underscores to be safe. And it's going to be .gpx. It automatically tagged that on there. And then hit Save. And we're going to go OK. Boom. Translation successful. So that's what you want to see. You can just close out of this program. There's not like a file you've saved within here when you're done. So we're going to just X out of GPS Babel, and we're going to move on to the next software that I use to get it into the GPS called MapSource. So we've made it into MapSource. This is what it looks like when you open it up. I'm pretty sure you might have to use another actual importing program. There's many available out there. MapSource is a really old program that I actually got off of my dad's original disk that he purchased back when you would actually purchase software on disks. I know, crazy, right? If you happen to have map source, that's great, but the principle is the same. We're going to open up our file that we converted to a GPX file by going into my KML GPX folder, and we're looking for GPX files. And let's open. So I got to it by going show selected track on map. These are a lot of tracks that I saved into one folder and then had saved that folder out as a KML from Google Earth. Now that I'm importing it back in as a GPX to map source after having converted in GPS Babel, free software online, I can see that they are all broken up into different sections. Because of that, I can actually edit them slightly within this program, but I won't go into too much detail. I usually never have to do that, and most of you are probably using some other kind of program. So if I want to actually export to my GPS, I want to select all the files, and I want to go send to device. Now I have the cable here. GPSs come with this weird cable. It looks like that. Weird little end on it, but you can find it online if you've lost yours or something like that. They sell a lot of them by themselves. Just noting, I use RAM mounts for my GPS. This is RAM, and the ball that's mounted on my bike is also RAM. I can pull it out by just going like that. There's the actual GPS. In my case, it opens up on the back right there, and you can see where the plug goes in. It's now plugged into my computer. Some GPSs will turn on automatically and show up as devices. Others you need to turn on after you've plugged them in. I'm going to go send to device, and I'm going to say find device. No devices were found. Oh, just showed up as a device those. If it doesn't work at first, try again. I'm selecting waypoints and tracks, and I'm going to say send. I'm not actually going to do it because my GPS is pretty full right now. But if I hit send, they would all appear in here as tracks. And next I'll show you how I actually navigate through the screens on this GPS and what I'm trying to set up to look for when I'm riding. On to the magic of the GPS. I use the 62, my dad uses the 60. They're all very similar with some differences in menus. There's a new version out. I'm not sure what number it is. Notice how it's still searching for where I am right now. Each time you turn it on, this can take a while. So turn on your GPS well before you actually want to head out. In the meantime, you can access the menu by hitting the menu button. Found me. Okay, so now that it's found me, it always draws a line string from the last place it thought you were. That's your current track. We don't really want that in there. So we're gonna go to menu, and we're gonna hit menu again. We're gonna go to track manager. We're gonna go to current track, and we're gonna go clear current track. And we really do want to do that. If I want to view the tracks that I have, I'm gonna go to menu, track manager. Those pins that I made in Google Earth, those are waypoints, so that's waypoint manager. We're gonna go to track manager. So these tracks have a lot of different names. Something that's named like this is a track that I saved at the end of a day. So if you go riding, your GPS will start creating its own file tracing where you are. If at the end of the day you want to save that, you would go to current track and you would save track. When you save track, it automatically puts in the date, but you can rename it to something else as well. If you want to exit, you can always hit quit down here. So if I want to quit back out to all my tracks, let's find something that kind of looks like it has a name. Let's find something a bit bigger if I have anything. Okay, here we go. We're gonna hit enter on this. Let's say I wanted to hide it on the map. Sometimes when you import tracks, they automatically hide and you have to hit show on map. One of the most important things is to have your tracks be a color that stands out. So make sure that that color is set to something like black, because on that light background, all you're really looking for when you're riding is seeing if you can get that line to appear on your screen. Let's look at what the actual GPS map looks like. So in my case, it's very simple. You can zoom in and out with these two buttons here, in, out. So let's go over to where those tracks are. When you're really zoomed out and you're looking for tracks, they often just show up as this kind of black squiggle. This is the Shasta tracks that I have, for example. The more you zoom in, the more detailed it gets. The key to using a GPS while riding is to keep it zoomed in. So you want 500, 300, or maybe about 200 feet showing as your scale. I usually leave it on 300 or 500. Imagine you're riding along and your arrow's here. It will look straight up and down. It will orient the arrow direction to the direction that you're facing. So keep in mind, you want to have that GPS kind of perpendicular on the handlebars because that will keep your arrow facing forward. But sometimes the arrow gets confused. So again, it's more important where the arrow is and less important which direction it's facing. If you want to zoom out to check where you are, you just stop and you start zooming out and you can see that scale. If I had pins, the pins would show up. If I had made those pins in Google Earth and saved them out in the folder, converted them in GPS Babel, and then imported them into my GPS, they would show up as flags. I don't have any here, but I know I have them elsewhere. But again, the most important thing that a lot of people, it's hard to miss turns when you're that zoomed in. Like the line is your only truth. All you care about is the line. Try not to have some kind of GPS settings or system where you're seeing all kinds of topography or creeks or anything like that, because it's just going to be confusing when you glance down at your GPS. You just want that blank background and the black line. If you want to move around, you can use the arrow keys. It'll automatically start moving the map around. However, you kind of can get stuck there, meaning it won't reset back on your pin unless you go page to something else. Let's say the compass, and then page back to that map. Again, if you want to do anything in the menu, it's menu. You could navigate to different things, but just hit menu again. Waypoint manager. You can see I have waypoints in here. You can also drop waypoints on any GPS while riding, which is helpful. But if I want to go quit to go back, track manager. If you have tracks like Jeep roads or Babel trails, stuff that you don't necessarily want to follow during your route, but you have mapped out in case of an emergency, color code those as something different. Like let's say it was this one. This was a Jeep road that intercepted my route and I just wanted to know where it was. I often put those as something like green or yellow. So they will show up, but it's easier to spot a difference versus that black line, which is the one you want to stay on. Having a buddy running a GPS with the same tracks obviously decreases the likelihood of something going wrong, but I've led many rides with just one GPS running. Bring extra batteries. These tend to run down. You could potentially run through a whole set of batteries during a ride. If your screen goes really dark or it seems too dim to look at, you can usually adjust the brightness somewhere. In my case, by pressing the side button, you can see how it does that. But often I like to actually navigate with it on that mid barely bright setting because it really conserves battery. And again, you want it set up so that you can just glance down and see if you're on that line or not. So that's pretty much it, but I hope there's something useful in there. The best way to get comfortable and confident with navigation and track building is just practice. It opens up a whole world of possibilities with riding and where you can ride. And yeah, all your friends will respect you. So go forth and GPS away.